So, welcome everybody to this monthly free group coaching call where I do different topics every month. And this time it's basically your questions. But I wanted to warm us up by talking about some of my favorite topics. And they all have to do with differences. It's differences between people, especially people you're intimate with, that cause the most pain and the most growth. And when I say growth, I mean really, really getting out of your egocentric idea of self and expanding your sense of self, uh, dealing with the fact that not everybody is like you. That's the first big lesson. Hopefully, we learn that somewhere, at least by our teens. And then we keep relearning it. Not everybody is like you. Okay, let's get that one. Um, And I do want to make a big picture statement before I get into this theme of some of the biggest differences that cause conflict in relationships. So I think humanity is and has been for a while struggling to learn how to deal with diversity, differences, communicating with people who have different values and different personality styles and come from different cultures. I mean, the world really has gotten more diverse. And so that's expanding us or stretching us in ways that are kind of uncomfortable. So I'm all about embracing that discomfort to see what you can learn. So here we go. I think one of the biggest differences that I sometimes see is one person in a relationship, and this is, I'm going to be framing it as intimate relationships, but it could be friendships or it could be a parent-child relationship. And it's particularly problematic when it's a parent-child relationship, because here's the difference I want to speak about. One of the people is more sensitive, more emotionally triggerable, more vigilant about whether they're safe or not. Let's just say more fearful for whatever reasons, or perhaps have some kind of attention deficit kinds of things that just make them less quick to take action and make decisions and less confident. So you've got this couple, let's say, where she's got the more sensitive personality and he's more of a can-do type of a guy and he's confident and don't let's not hesitate, let's just do it kind of a personality. And with that kind of a relationship, and these two people love each other very much. This is kind of a hypothetical, but I've worked with many couples who have this polarity. The person who's the more can-do person is going to have to do more adapting. And often that person who's the can-do person has always had to adapt a lot. The way they became so self-sufficient and adaptable is because they didn't get used to having a lot of tender, loving care. I mean, they were cared for as children, but they handled their own emotions and they handled life on their own a lot. So they got used to that. They got kind of strong, strong looking. And we often, in couples like that, will think, well, the sensitive one is kind of you know, weaker, that sort of thing. But the sensitive one can bring a lot of uh, deeper insights to the can-do person. But the key thing I want to say here to any of you who have ever been in this kind of a relationship is the more can-do person is going to have to do more adapting. And that might, in this case, it's the man, that might push his buttons, like the what about me button. And of course, the person who's the more sensitive person is going to get their buttons pushed, and buttons is the same synonymous to triggering, emotionally reactive, where you go into some kind of survival mode in your nervous system. So the sensitive one may get triggered feeling, gee, here I am again, not being respected, not being valued, not feeling enough, that sort of thing. So, has anybody ever been in that kind of a polarity? Let me see a show of hands. This, it's not universal, but okay, some people. Rochelle, is that your name with the two thumbs up? So, anybody want to say anything about what I just said? Questions or comments about how that is and which end you're on, and maybe give us some insights to where what you've learned about this. Anybody want to say anything about this one? Well, it looks like Elisheva has a hand up. So let's, what do you got, Elisheva? Oh, can you unmute
Hello.
yourself?
Hello.
Yeah, you can unmute
Hello.
yourself, right? Hi.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Can you hear me? Yeah. Well, what I can say is that it helps to do healing so that I'm not as much like a rabbit, and it's not as hard to it's not as easy to just throw me off balance. And as a sensitive one, I can say that's been very helpful.
It's
And
nice
it
to
also
be able to
allows the
admit that you're the sensitive one, Elisheva. Some people don't even want to admit that. So I want to say, and the sensitive one, these are labels, folks, and there's all kinds of polarities within that one relationship that you're talking about. But it's good to be able to kind of label it as a way of accepting and bringing tenderness to yourself. Is there more you wanted to say, Elisheva, before we
just
from
that
Maria?
that that you know well, we're also practicing having a pause and um doing the trigger work that you have taught us, but also I'm realizing that if I'm a little bit more steady, then it allows the can do person to feel more of their little vulnerable scared parts and share about them,
That's a
and
good
that seems
point.
to be really helpful.
When you're more regulated, they can afford to be a little less regulated in a sense, if you know what I mean. Because the can-do
That's
person
exactly
is
it.
feeling unsafe too when there's triggering in the space. And what Ellie Shep is
Right.
thinking about is the pause agreement, because they've worked with my tools. You and your partner have worked with my tools about when you feel the first sign of triggering. This is not always possible. First sign of triggering, somebody will say the word pause or some other neutral word like that. But pause is my favorite because it doesn't mean we're never going to have this conversation again. It doesn't mean stop talking. Well, it sort of does in that moment. It does mean stop talking. It means stop doing whatever you're doing because you're already triggered, and everything that's going to come after that is going to come from that part of your brain that's the fight, flight, freeze, the scared part, the part that sees your partner as a caricature of themselves, as somebody who's dangerous. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about triggers in a little while in this, but just wanted to say that much. Uh, a shout out for the pause practice. Let's hear from Marisa. You had your hand raised.
Hi, thank you. Thank you for offering this, Susan. I think, I mean, I have that experienced that dynamic before, but what I feel very much right now is that I feel myself in both places at different times and different contexts. Like sometimes I am such the sensitive one, and then sometimes I am the can do one. And I think it's the same with my partner. Like we both have both, and it feels very tricky because it's almost like our sensitive parts then trigger other sensitive parts, and it's hard to kind of, it's like, uh, I want to be, sometimes I'm in my can do part, um, and then he'll be in the sensitive part, and then vice versa. And it can be very much like, Someone's always sensitive. Like it's very hard to navigate. Anyway, but the main thing I wanted to share was about the both in me. Like I really feel sometimes like different parts are so strong. I'm in my can-do party. I'm like ready to take on the world, and then again at a moment's trigger, I become the sensitive one.
Mm,
Anyway,
yeah. Listening to you, I'm saying to myself, notice how uh, difficult it is to have triggering going on in our relationships. I mean, just from like reading between the lines of what you're saying, Marisa, it's like that's a real pain in the ass that we get triggered so much. We're trying to avoid that. Oh, so I don't know if everybody is in that frame of mind, but I'm trying in my work to legitimize the fact that we need to accept, and I'm not criticizing what you said, Marisa, I'm just sort of remarking on, I think it's kind of universal that we wish we didn't get triggered, but admitting it more easily, like you did, Marisa, and like Elisheva has, admitting it more easily moves us along much quicker to calming ourselves and getting back to our higher cognitive functioning where we can see our partner more realistically and go, oh, they're not the enemy, they're not against me, I'm safe. We need to be able to reassure our own safety. Um, but
yeah,
first, we have to realize that we're feeling unsafe. And a lot of times, the trigger reactions are ways of getting big. Not always, but anger is a way of getting big and feeling on top of that lack of safety. When what's really important, I think, is to recognize, wow, I'm not feeling safe emotionally right now. If it's physical, that's a whole other thing. Then you ought to get big and you ought to fight or run or something. But I'm I'm not talking about being attacked now, physically.
right.
So let me just see if there are any questions for me coming up, and then I'm going to go on to a different difference or polarity that comes up in relationships. Any questions? Yeah. Rochelle, is that how you say your name?
Yeah, Rochelle.
Okay.
Um, I wanted to know if you were able to take a moment to speak to in this dynamic, how the stronger, quote, person, less sensitive person navigates that piece after years of relationship going, the what about me, as you mentioned,
Mm-hmm.
because I've adapted so long, so long, so long.
Yeah.
Um, like that process of finding back to, oh, who am I? And
Yeah.
and how do we work this considering, those layers of subtle resentment that build up from the unconscious parts that, adapt without naming that they're adapting. And there's just so many layers there if you had anything to share
Yeah,
about.
I do. Um, Being able to admit that you have a what about me feeling is a huge first step because you're used to I can handle it. This tends to be associated with the more avoidant attachment style, and the more sensitive one tends to be associated with the more preoccupied, anxious type attachment style. Uh, I've done programs on those in the past, and maybe I'll put put that in the chat at some point if I can find that. I think I'll have to put it on Facebook actually because I won't have time to look for it now. But there's a good webinar on attachment styles that if you're into this polarity, I think you might enjoy that. So back to your question, Rochelle, you've built up sort of layers of resentment. Well, this is the content of trigger work. So if you can find any reaction in yourself, like what about me, or judging this other person, or just generalized kind of unfair type of thoughts or feelings, um, that's a beginning point for an inquiry. And I'll say what the inquiry is in a minute, but we need to do a lot of these inquiries into, oh, there's a pain point, or there's me not feeling safe. Maybe it's just real vague, or maybe it's a specific incident where I felt burdened by the other person, let's say. So you start with the memory or even the word, or the sentence, what about me? And okay, what does that feel like? What's the actual like emotional tone? What body sensations are there when I have that thought, that what about me? And maybe I can feel pain somewhere or some kind of tenderness like in my heart. And sometimes I'll feel drawn to touch my body in certain places where the pain shows up. I always recommend that before you start this inquiry, that you calm your nervous system and make sure you're safe with yourself, doing breath practices, which will kind of open up a space for whatever wants to arise. Painful memories usually need some space. So you're, in a sense, opening up a compassionate witness part of yourself. This is an important resource for dealing with triggers. And that naturally arises for people. This is how I've learned about holding space for yourself, is just through working with so many clients who naturally start to feel compassion for themselves as they go into these painful memories and that sort of thing. It's not always a painful memory, or sometimes it's a series of painful memories, my first husband, when I was a teenager, and then my mother was always crying, not available for me. I had to be the adult in the room. Those kinds of memories will come up. And the idea is feeling with that tender part of yourself. It could be a younger part or not, but feeling with, like empathy with that tender part of yourself, so that you are both the witness, like the mother and the child until you let yourself feel some of the feelings that got stuck way back when you were 7 or 4. A lot of feelings get stuck inside of us, and we have to suppress them, especially if we grew up in an avoidant kind of a home where everything was nice and cared for just fine, but there wasn't special attention to my emotions and to my emotional needs. So that's what creates the more avoidant type, who grows up to be very competent and can do and so forth. These are generalizations that won't work for every single one of you, but the main point is, you asked Rochelle, what do you do? What do you do now after all these years of built up resentment? You keep doing this inner work and this inner inquiry. And then sometimes you can reveal to your partner the vulnerabilities that you've discovered in yourself and share that with them in a vulnerable way, and ask for co-regulation. Co-regulation is, I, I need to feel loved. Can we have a hug? And sometimes you ask and it's uh, not a safe time and the other person isn't available. But asking for co-regulation is another important part of your healing, is being willing to admit that you need things because you're used to being a kind of a self-sufficient type. So that's what I've got to say about that one. Any other questions before we go on, or comments? Okay, so here's another polarity that comes up a lot in relationships. And this one I wrote about in my last blog called "Do People Tell You the Truth or What You Want to Hear?" Now I'll give the case of a particular couple that I know. she's very vigilant about being included in his life, knowing everything that's going on in his life. So truth telling has become a big issue because he's the kind of guy who just never learned to deal with conflict. Always a nice guy, pretty successful as a child, and just didn't have a lot of conflicts, and so and learned to sneak around and avoid conflict. Some of us don't necessarily have to have any horrible trauma. Like nobody really likes conflict, especially if you're having it with your parents who are going to either disapprove or control you. So maybe I should get a show of hands here. How many people know that as children you kind of snuck around to just avoid conflict with your parents around certain things? I certainly did. So some of this is in our shadow, and we don't like to admit it, but it it's a thing with kids. And so he got in the habit of just getting his way, but by not telling the truth. And she's picked up on this, and she's caught him in a few what I would consider fairly minor lies, but she totally blows up about it. I mean, threatened divorce over one that was really not, to most of her friends, didn't seem that significant, but it was, he did hide the truth from her. And so her background was that her father had affairs, and it was very, very painful. It was kept secret, sort of, and it was extremely painful for the whole family. And so that's her trauma that she brings to this marriage, and it has her just deathly afraid of secrets. So in a sense, we can empathize with both people, I think. Nobody's bad or wrong here. But the more she probes, so this is that vicious cycle that couples tend to get into, and almost all couples have at least one of these kind of predictable recurring cycles. She probes and he hides. And the more she probes, the more he hides. And the more he hides, the more she probes. Now, if you've ever been in any relationship for any length of time, maybe you've noticed some kind of reactive cycle. There could be different reactive cycles that perhaps we could talk about in a minute. But what I just want to say that knowing your reactive cycle as a couple and knowing then that, wait, it's our cycle that's the problem. Like here we are, I'm trying to get the truth out of you, and you're fumbling with your words and saying things I don't trust. Okay, that's our reactive cycle. So learning how to name your reactive cycle, that's just one. Another one could be the the more attention, and the more I want your attention, the less available you are for your own reasons, but in some ways you have some kind of fear of somebody depending on you. Maybe your mother depended on you inappropriately when she was getting a divorce from your father and confided in you. I mean, that's just one scenario that I know of where then that guy was very phobic about anybody depending on him too much. So the more I depend on you, the more you resist, and the more you resist, the more I depend, and that's a cycle. I'll ask some of you for ideas about other cycles, but the idea that I wanted to get across here, and only just by using that honesty, conflict avoidant polarity there, is almost all couples, they get together and there's a lot of similarities and you don't notice all those differences at first, but eventually some critical difference will emerge. So it's usually some kind of a style difference that comes from like attachment styles or personality styles, or it could be cultural differences, like a high disclosing culture and a low disclosing culture. You know, that does occur. But any difference then becomes kind of scary because you think, oh, we had such harmony and now we've lost it. And it pushes people's buttons. Once the differences start, it's just differences push buttons. It's like it threatens separation. It threatens you must not love me, or we're disconnected in some ways. And I believe disconnection is triggering to most people. It's just that primal separation that we've all experienced on various levels. You could say being born is kind of a separation. I'm not going to go into the philosophical arguments about all that right now, but can you think of a polarity in your own life that became a vicious cycle? Can anybody share anything about that? I'd like to hear other examples. Now, Krish, I don't know if you have your hand up to speak. I know you've had it up for a while, but
No, no, Susan, I just
have
lifted it
anything,
because
you have anything
you
to say
asked.
about that?
No, no, you asked for people who had a particular pattern where they snuck around their family, and for that I raised my hand. I forgot
Ah,
to ring it. That's
all
all.
right. All right. Thanks for the disclosure there. Nice to hear from you, Krish.
Same here.
Anybody have an example of a vicious cycle that you either want to just share or ask about? Sarah and Michael.
I think we have all of them to the absolute extreme and started out that way with him being, well, you can talk about him being very closed down, growing up in a family where there was no emotions allowed. Me growing up in a family where that's all there was, too much drama, too much hitting of walls. And me wanting attention, there being subterfuge in the beginning years of our relationship and secrets that I didn't know about. Of course, I became more and more hypervigilant, found out about the secrets, became even more hypervigilant.
Yeah.
And finally, after 7 years, we're starting to calm down and starting to learn some of these skills. But
Lots of therapy and lots of psychedelic intervention.
Uh-huh.
But it been really interesting just to see how, as a child, if I was too big, I was invited to go outside and stay outside until it was time to come in. And then, and how that literally followed me into adulthood, and I was quiet. Um,
and just felt that feelings were none of your business. And me being extremely feeling, we really, it's not like we had harmony and then discovered we've been at it with the polarities on almost everything that you've mentioned since the beginning. And I think I'm still working on how to manage triggers from
Mhm.
the subterfuge, and he's still working on how to manage triggers from.
I'm still learning where to point to on my body where I'm
Mhm.
feeling an emotion. Like
Yeah.
I don't even have the vocabulary really for like, oh, I'm feeling angry or sad. Like I or where it is or in me or resides in me. So it's been
It's
really
been really great. And really,
Good work you're doing. Let me say something about what you guys uh, can can learn from each other. This kind of polarity, these people have a lot to learn from each other because what she's overlearned, he's underlearned. She's overlearned, taking your let's call it taking your emotions seriously. On one level, we shouldn't take anything seriously. It's all fabrications of the mind. But um, one type takes your emotions very seriously. The other type never learned to take their emotions seriously enough. So that's Michael. And she can learn that I can get maybe I can get a little distance from my emotions. Maybe I can have sort of Michael's parents in my head saying, calm yourself down here. Maybe not as extreme as Michael's parents, but has a little internal governor, and like I can be alone for a while and it's not going to kill me. And Michael um, can learn to like feel those little things that right now are still kind of buried. And for Sarah, they're so out in the open that perhaps it doesn't leave room for you, Michael, to find yours sometimes. But on the other hand, it stimulates you to find yours because you have to show up for something like what Sarah's offering you. So I'm just thinking that you guys have a lot of good work available and a lot of good growth.
Yeah, what a wonderful way to describe that because it's been very difficult at times. It's as difficult as learning a new language.
Mhm.
Oh,
So
yeah.
thank you
Thank you
for
too.
helping me.
Yeah.
Oh, that's lovely. I know it's work, and that's the thing with childhood uh, deprivation and trauma. That is an extra load that most of us carry. We carry something uh, like it's almost like an extra weight. It makes everything harder in our lives and makes us more triggerable. And most of us have something. If we dig around and if we stay in a relationship long enough, a relationship will help us surface that up to consciousness. And then we might feel helpless and out of control and this is hopeless. But this is the work of being human, is coming to terms with the hand you were dealt. I use that phrase in some of my writing, like, okay, I didn't get this need met, and I do have mistrust. Let's say mistrust of authority. That's a good one for nowadays. Or I do have a conflictual relationship with authority. I don't trust authority sometimes, and sometimes I'm too gullible and I trust too much. And when I say authority, I could mean a book that you're reading or anybody in like a teacher. And because you had an unreliable authority figure in your childhood, that will have echoes throughout your life in certain ways. It'll confuse your relationship with people that you deem to have more power than you. Um, and we could call it your cross to bear. We could call it the hand you were dealt. And that's one of the hardest things, but that's what trigger work eventually gives us is, oh, this really happened to me. And the echoes of that are in some sense still with me. But the more I can recognize that operating in my reactivity and bring some compassion, pause, and not react from that place, the the more I can kind of handle life, even with this wooden leg that I've got. I was born with one leg. Here's the hand you were dealt. Born with one leg shorter than the other. I often say that one. And if it's a slightly different thing than childhood trauma, but it's the hand you were dealt, and it's a point of grief. So almost everybody, when they do trigger work with me guiding them, they'll come to a place of grief around the lost potential. That child had 100% potential and 30% got lost because I was fighting a battle that a 4-year-old should never have to fight. But then now that's my burden that I carry into my adulthood and so forth. That's just one perspective on this, but it's just my way of trying to help us have generosity toward our our wholeness includes some brokenness. And the more you can accept and kind of integrate whatever we call your brokenness into your wholeness, it 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 won't you won't limp anymore. You won't limp the way you did before you accepted your wooden leg type of thing. So let me just see if there's any comments or questions at all coming up, and then maybe I'll go on to one more uh, relationship issue. Anybody just have anything at all that has nothing to do with what I just said, but just in your life that you like some free advice about? Okay, Christine. Hi, Christine.
Hello.
I know you, don't I, from a long time
A
ago?
long time ago, we
Yeah,
were
I still
all
remember
counseling. Yeah,
remember you guys. So go ahead. What's
I
your
have to say that it didn't seem to help. Uh, so what can one party of the couple do when the other one seems to have no interest in even talking about this stuff or even watching Susan Campbell videos or whatever?
You can invite them to like read a book or something like that, but you've probably already done that. Um, you can let them know what the consequences to you are, like how lonely it feels, um, what you envision for the two of you, if you could get past something that um, this work might help with. So, plea from the heart, sales pitch that says here's the reward on the other end of this. Uh, Speaking about your own longing for more intimacy, connection, that sort of thing, is the first step. I call that the personal direct approach. And then perhaps there's what I would also then call the more strategic indirect approach. If just, open-hearted dialogue doesn't work with somebody, and this isn't just for partners, you can use this at work too. Work you might take the personal approach with somebody that you want to have a different kind of relationship with. Strategic indirect might mean rewards, like a little bit like the sales pitch idea. There's a reward. If you'll do this, then I'll do this type of thing, or this will be a better life for us, and so forth. Or little reinforcements, like if I'm trying to get my husband to drink more water. Okay, this is a great one. I'll say, it really turns me on when I see you drinking water. That kind of thing. That's strategic. I call that creative nagging. Um, so I get wet when I see you drinking water. I mean, I really do shit like that with my partner, and he's easy. After the strategic indirect, if that doesn't work, you'll maybe want to speak about consequences. You know, I've tried opening my heart and pleading with you, and I've tried other things to try to bring us more on the same page with this issue. I'm kind of giving up. I think it's either you have some kind of a consequences. That's the final effort is there's going to be some kind of consequences. I mean, the example that I like to use, but it's kind of extreme, is you're an alcoholic. I've tried reasoning with you, and you haven't given up drinking. I haven't gone to a program. So I'm going to go live with my sister now. I still love you. I don't want to abandon our relationship, but I'm not going to live with somebody who's actively an alcoholic. If you're in recovery, great. So I'm going to go live with my sister for a while. And if you get in recovery for about 6 months, then I'll come back. So that's that's consequences.
But of course, you have to be
You have to,
willing to
yeah,
actually
yeah,
do that.
yeah, exactly. So this is radical. The consequences step isn't for most people. I mean, it's easy to use the example of the alcoholic, but other things are a little harder to justify too. Um, and so I guess the final thing, none of that works, and you're not willing to impose any tangible consequences. You need to become a saint, which means you let go of having your needs met. You go, okay, these needs are not going to be met. I'm going to willingly adapt to my circumstances as they are. So that's called being a saint. I wrote about that in one of my blogs about dealing with some of the challenges of a partner who's declining. Sometimes there's just nothing you can do. Your partner doesn't have what the capacities they used to have. And you going to talk about it? You can't talk anymore with that kind of thing. So, I've written a bunch of stuff on final stage of life, cognitive decline, and so forth. And I'm coming up with another blog soon on tough conversations in the final stage of life because I'm going through that with my partner. So it's kind of interesting to me. Other questions? Thanks for that, Christine. Lorna.
Hi, Susan. Good to see you. I wouldn't have jumped in unless you invited sort of anything
Yeah,
questions
anything's good.
or comment. I'm almost 80 and I've never married, no kids, some long-term relationships, but basically never lived with anyone. Lots of childhood trauma, the whole deal. And I guess the question I'm asking myself really, is it worth it? I mean, there's a longing. There's still a longing find a partner, but I just have so much shit in, in my stuff. I'm an avoidant, an anxious avoidant, and on and on. I've done lots of work, but there's still lots of work to be done. And that's the question. Is it worth it for me? I'm almost wanting to be a saint, like you just said, and say, you know what? It doesn't seem like it's meant for this lifetime. And is this how I want to be spending my time? Because all kinds of triggers will happen, I know.
Yeah, that's a really good question. It's a very personal moment here that many people have, is it worth it? Is it my true path that have to keep pursuing this relationship thing? But I do want to dialogue with you for a minute, Lorna. Is it worth it? What's the cost to you to be seeking a meaningful relationship, a one-on-one relationship? What's the cost? You say it. What's your it?
Do you mean how much time or energy
Well,
or
that could be the cost. Yeah. I mean, that could be a cost.
the cost is
In
huge.
your mind, what's the cost? I imagine it's some kind of pain, but
Yes, it's pain and it's just not accepting myself as I am. I actually love living alone. I have no interest in living with someone. I'd love to have a pal to travel with and do fun things with, but not a live-in mate. I'm not good at taking care of other people, so I don't want, and at our age,
Mhm.
that's kind of what you're inviting, right? In a partnership.
Well, look, this is what I wanted to say next. I didn't know how you were going to answer, but I already had my answer ready for you, which is why not advertise for exactly the kind of relationship you want? I'm not going to live with you, and I'm not going to be your nurse, and no matter how bad your health gets, and being real upfront and straight about who you are. I'll bet you there's a lot of people in your age category that feel kind of similarly. I don't want to get too emotionally involved, but traveling, going out
But
once
here's
in a
the
while.
thing, I get very needy and need a lot of emotional involvement once I'm in a relationship. I know that about myself.
Well, you got to make sure you define it in a way that, if you can, I know this is very mental, okay? I don't know if you can do this, but define it in a way that doesn't promote or even allow emotional dependency. Now, how would you structure that? that would be something to explore with somebody. Maybe somebody who's not your type. You know what I mean? There's certain, if you dated a lot, some people you could just totally get along with as a wonderful pal, but they're no, they're sort of not your emotional, like soulmate type thing. And so it doesn't hook you emotionally. Try to find one of those guys. I don't know if that, I mean, maybe you'd get dependent on anybody. Honestly, I'm half kidding with that because I do take seriously what you said, is you do get dependent when you get close to somebody. And so I'll say then somebody might have to end it. And and that's kind of callous too of me to say that. I'm not really sure what you do then. Call me. Get that far. If you get that far, I'll be
Love your suggestion to just tell the truth.
I'll be
I
cheering for you.
love
Yeah,
telling. Yeah,
really, for all of us.
saves a lot of time and
We've got
waste.
this framework that, oh, I couldn't tell somebody on the first date that I'm not monogamous. We've got all these like beliefs. Where's that going to get you? So, okay,
So much.
Marco, I'd love to hear from you.
Sure. Thank you, Susan. So Lorna's question really caused me. I want to ask you a question. What do you think of what seems to be so many more conscious, relationally attuned women versus men, and it seems to get even more so the older we get. And I'm asking because I feel kind of a pain for the women that we men, we're just often just not there.
Okay, well, there's some truth to that, Marco, but it's a story. It's a story that a lot of people share, both men and women. But where's that story going to get you? I, 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 there's plenty of conscious men. There's plenty of men who are interested in this getting real work that I meet that that drag their girlfriends into counseling, for example. So it's not all one way. And I think that belief really doesn't serve you because, okay, statistically, you may be right, Marco, and the journalists who put this out may be right. But I think that that's an excuse. If you hold that, if you're a woman and you hold that, oh, those men are not conscious, it's a self-protective bullshit story in my book. What do you think of that, Marco?
I think that's a brilliant reply and sort of the inspiring thing to say as well. Maybe the women need to lead.
That's a good one too. I love that, Marco, and I've done that. You know, I wrote the book Truth in Dating when I was single, and I just here's the book you need if you're going to date Susan Campbell. Here's the manual. You know, yeah, we can lead if we don't feel a chip on our shoulder about it. Why do I always have to do the heavy lifting? I hear that so much from females, and so what if you do? If there's love in your heart, I mean, so it's it's like those are our triggers. Why do I have to always do the heavy lifting? That's something that you should inquire into if you have that thought in your mind. Any kind of thoughts that are not friendly toward the other need to be inquired into. They're indications of some kind of um, damage or wound to to your wholeness. And if you can find that and love that back into wholeness with yourself. I mean, we need to love those parts that are alienated from life, from others, from ourselves. We need to get to know them first, know where they came from. Oh, geez, nobody ever had empathy for me, and I'm kind of judgmental of people. Well, okay, go ahead and feel all of that and the grief around that. Okay, thanks for that interesting, challenging question, Marco. Anne, what's your comment or question?
Thank you. I'm jumping in because of your offer for open-ended questions.
Yes.
Um, Many may have run into this through the years. I ran headlong into it just last November. And it has to do with a longtime beloved, intimate friend, a girlfriend. And after with whom we shared everything. We just shared so many years of our process. And so after the election, I learned that she made a different choice than I did. And I was pretty shocked. And I did not see a way to continue that level of connection and feel safe because her choice put me at risk, my family, her choices affected my communities, and etc. So after many months of attempting to work through it, I wrote her and said, I don't see how to continue a friendship with you. And it took her some months to reply and say, basically, okay. And now, almost a year later, I'm finding the sadness arising again. Like, did I make the right choice? Would there have been a way? I still don't see how I could be vulnerable with her given what she has chosen. I just wonder if, you come across this through
Mm,
the years.
sure.
Thank you.
When you say attempted to work through it, was that in dialogue with her or within yourself?
Just myself.
Well, so have you attempted to understand where she's coming from and just see what you feel when you hear the response? Have you done that?
I didn't do that because given how she voted, that to me said everything. That's
I don't think it says everything. Not that you're ever going to agree on certain things, but if you can't say, I understand you voted for da da da, and you probably could figure out that I didn't. Could we talk about that? So that's the setting the context. That's the first step in having a difficult conversation is naming what the conversation is. That's called setting the context. Could we talk about that? That's getting agreement to have the discussion.
yes,
Then,
yes, I understand. I
then you,
didn't see a way to do that because
and well,
what was done was done. That's how I kept looking at it. It is done, and I am at risk
well, this
because
is about feelings,
yeah,
your feelings. So, people can get kind of stuck on certain data points before exploring the feelings. So when you say, how can I be vulnerable with her? Um, here's what's happened inside of me and what I've done when I've been in your shoes.
thank you.
My brother and sister-in-law are MAGA. Although I said to my brother, um, do you think the 2020 election was stolen? And he said, no. I knew he voted for Trump. He said, no. I go, well, phew, that's good. You know, but now we can talk. But when I began talking to him and listening to his reasons and so forth, had to do with his cronies and his golf club and who he affiliates with in the South for his business and so forth. I let him know that it's like we're in different worlds now, and you're my beloved brother, and it seems like we've gone in such different directions, and we're in such different worlds now that this is hard for me. It's like somebody you care about and you are watching different movies. And so that's all I said. I mean, we didn't come to any closure or anything like that, but I was able to share that vulnerability and it felt good.
Yes, thank you. I did in the letter say I was very vulnerable in the letter and said I did, yeah. So, well, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah,
Appreciate the
yeah.
time to talk.
Sometimes you can't like get anywhere, but I'm not going to cut off relationships with him because I mean, we just, I mean, it's not that we don't talk about that, but that's not the main focus of our relationship. So I can't say what each person should do in this situation.
Yeah.
Uh, there are definitely people that I feel less close to after having had that conversation because I'm a curious person, and so I do like to find out, well, where are you coming from? And geez, I said, why did you vote for Trump to one guy? And he says, well, he's got a lot of money and he has a hot wife.
Oh
So
my God.
okay, I get to myself, I go, okay, I get that. He and I are in totally different worlds. I don't need to have many
That's,
conversations with him. But he was never a friend anyway, really. He was just an acquaintance.
thank you.
Tough though. Yeah. So anybody getting triggered by this conversation right now? I'm just looking around. I see some people laughing. All right. Well, we're almost out of time. Let me just see if there's anything quick that I might either hear or respond to in the last couple minutes.
I have something else, but I talked already, so if someone else wants to go.
Okay, we'll give somebody else first dibs, but then it'll be you, Marisa, you and me again. That's fine with me. All right, go take it away.
I guess it's kind of what somebody else here already said, just about doing the work together. I think listening to all this and hearing from Sarah and Michael and the journey you've been on in 7 years, and knowing for myself that relationships are very difficult, and so many triggers come up and they're hard, and I want to work through them. And I guess just curious, what if your goal is to have more fun and feel more joy and sometimes together, and sometimes it just feels like it cannot stop. Like, is there, I'm willing to do the work and I want to, and I think so is my partner, but I know especially for him, he has a feeling of like, when is this going to be done? Can't we just have fun? And of course, it's only been a year. So, but I mean, it's like, yeah. Do you have any thoughts about that?
Well, it is whatever that's the thing. Can't we just have fun is a great conversation to have, and I know you're having that with your partner. And by the way, I don't think a year is that long, given
Oh, no, it's not long at all.
what I see.
Tiny.
People go through, a few years of struggle at least, learning how to practice the pause thing. Even the pause is so hard. See, if you learn to pause sooner and accept triggering as normal and natural, the pain will become much less. It's the resistance to what is, and what is, geez, I'm way more sensitive to things like that than I wish I was. That could be the what is.
Yeah.
We're here to be more learning to accept just whatever is, whatever shows up. And I guess we're not very good at it yet, but see if you can talk yourself into this is normal. I've been conditioned to resist this particular kind of pain. And I'll say one more thing. I'll go over time for a little minute here. Most of us are conditioned to see ourselves as bad or wrong when we're in emotional pain, partly because parents get upset, anxious, or agitated in some way when a child is inconsolable when they're really little, really little. There was times when you were in pain and your parent didn't know what to do, and you got the vibe or the message subliminally that when I'm in pain, it makes my parents unhappy. And that is kind of a universal human experience. Not every single parent, I mean, but an awful lot of parents, they just patient for a while. We're trying to be patient. We've educated parenting classes, the whole bit, hold space for your child's emotions. you run out of patience after a while as a parent. It's not that easy. So it just it's one of those unfortunate things. So we've got this prejudice against emotional pain, and we make it way more a big deal than it needs to be. And I'm not trying to minimize it. We need to take it seriously, embrace it, love ourselves through it. But I'm on a campaign to help us just accept the normal pains that come with adult relationships.
Mm.
And then some days you could just declare as fun days that we avoid everything that bothers us. Let's have a day where we behave like tough kids, like the tough kid that nothing bothered them. So there's a game you could play. I'm not sure if it'll work or not.
Thank you.
I'll see you guys next month.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming on. Bye.
Thank you, Susan.
Sure. How do I stop recording here? Oh, there it is.